Hi, everyone. Welcome back to Authors on the Air. I'm your host, James Latwell, and we're part of the Authors on the Air Global Radio Network. And we have with us today one of my friends in the community. It's Ellen Kirschman. So, welcome, Ellen.
I'm happy to be here.
I'm happy to have you here. And we're going to be talking about Ellen's new book, Call Me Carmela. And it's part of the Dot Meyerhof mystery series that Ellen writes. And it's really a fascinating series. So, why don't we jump right into it and tell us a little bit about Dot?
Dot is a police psychologist. She is located in the Silicon Valley and she's in her early 50s. She should be counseling cops, not solving crimes, but she will not stop at anything to help her clients. She's kind of a feisty broad in many ways, and she takes orders from no one, including her chief, which gets her fired about every other week. Uh, she does things, as you know, I still am a police psychologist in my private life. And Dot's a lot younger than I am, a lot thinner than I am, and she takes risks and does things that I really would have lost my license for doing. But she's incredibly persistent in her search to get either at the bottom of a mystery or to find justice for her clients.
Yeah, she's a fun character. I mean, I've followed her over the course of the series, but um, Call Me Carmela, I think, is the fifth in the series, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah. So yeah, she has maintained that feisty thread throughout, and yeah, it does tend to get her into predicaments from time to time. So, and in this book, Call Me Carmela, that's no different. Tell us a little bit about the story that Dot finds herself in this new book.
So ordinarily, her caseload would be full of cops or other first responders like dispatchers. But what's different in this book is that her main client is an 18-year-old girl. Her name is Ava, and Ava is the goddaughter of a woman named Fran. Fran is the Kenilworth Police Department's only police widow. And when a police widow
Mhm.
asks for your help, you don't say no. And over the years, Fran and Dot have become friends. So that makes it even harder when this young girl runs away from home because she is adopted and she wants to find her birth parents. This upsets her adoptive parents to no end, and they have a big fight, and she runs away and runs to Fran's house. And Fran really doesn't know how to deal with this young woman, so she doesn't employ, but she asks Dot to pitch in. And Dot doesn't know much about adolescence because she's never made that part of her practice. But she did have a teenage life of her own that was filled with some difficulties. And so she can really identify with this young woman. Add to that the fact that in my very first book in this series, this is not a spoiler because the reader learns this on page one, a very young rookie that Dot was trying to help by the name of Ben kills himself. And she's really haunted by his death
Mhm.
and guilt ridden. What could she have done differently? What should she have done? What should she not have done? And so when she sees this other young person who is in somewhat desperate straits and is highly reactive, Ben's ghost kind of haunts her and moves her, perhaps more than under other circumstances, moves her to being the only one that wants to help this young woman find her birth parents.
Yeah, that's. I'm glad you touched on Ben's kind of connection with it because that really did have an impact on her, early on in her career, and that's not something that is going to just easily just disappear over time.
No,
So that's
it
I'm glad you brought that up.
yeah, no, it doesn't disappear. It sort of rides around on her shoulders all the time, and so he's on one. Ben is on one shoulder, and father, who I discovered somewhere as I was writing this series, was a 1960s Berkeley radical who got beaten up by the cops and lost the use of one of his arms, which limited what he was able to do to earn a living as an adult. And that, of course, affected his entire family. And he really hates cops. And so when Dot runs into something unpleasant dealing with the police or some bad actor who's a cop, her father's voice is just ringing in her ears all the time. So she's got these two guys that are sort of always with her at one time or another. She's a somewhat skeptical and cynical person with I think, a big heart and
Exactly.
a good sense of humor. I mean, she does not take many things in life too seriously, except her duties as a psychologist. And so part of wanting to show readers what it's like to be a cop or to be married to one, I also want people to know what it is like to be a clinician working with a population that isn't sure it trusts you.
That's very true. And you touched on it a little earlier that this isn't, Dot isn't autobiographical, but there are certain threads in her character that kind of parallel your life and experience. How much of you is in Dot?
Well, I think there's a lot of me in Dot. And as I said earlier, she does things that I would have lost my license for doing that are
Right.
basically sort of unethical. I like to refer to the book as being semi autobiographical because I've been inspired by all of the cops and dispatchers that I've worked with. I've been inspired by the experiences I've had riding around hundreds of hours in the back of a patrol car because they always put me in the back, the uncomfortable. Um, and so I've been inspired by that to write these stories in a way that I couldn't have written when I was writing nonfiction. And writing this book, I often say, was a lot of fun because it gave me the opportunity to do a little payback for some cops who were not very respectful towards me, to some incompetent psychologists that I had the displeasure to work with, and a couple of my ex-husbands. I mean, uh, it was just a lot of fun to be able to take um, what is somewhat factual and fictionalize it.
Yeah, in some ways, I can imagine that was very therapeutic for you. I know it has been for me when I'm able to get some of that stuff out on the page too.
Totally therapeutic. Yes.
Now, you've mentioned before in some of our other conversations that when folks that you know read your book, they want to know if that cop is me, or do you really have a microphone hidden in your office that the chief is listening to all the time? How often do those come up, and how do you respond to those kind of comments?
Well, when they come, I mean, when they come up in reference to my fiction, I'm
Mhm.
always able to say, "Look, if I base this on real people, I've disguised them or compressed three people into one." Although I did hear that there was a lottery in one of the departments that I worked with for a long time, that they were wondering if my cantankerous secondary character, Eddie Rimbauer, uh, which one of the cops that I knew was this based on? I don't know if that lottery ever actually happened, but when someone asked me, I said, "Oh, it's based on all of you." I just I smushed you all together and to make this character. Um, and it is true that I worked for one agency for 25 years, and the day I left that agency, there were still officers who thought I had a hidden camera that went right up to the chief's office, which, if I didn't know how to keep my mouth shut, I wouldn't have lasted 25 years in any police organization. So confidentiality is really, really important to police officers for many reasons.
I love it. Now, in Tell Me, Carmela, I mean, secrets are all folded into this story. Secrets are very powerful,
Mhm.
but what is it about secrets and family secrets that just drive so much passion and suspense in family drama?
The secrets are incredibly damaging. And, because once you tell a secret, it's like telling a lie. You have to keep covering it over and over again. And people tell secrets and they keep secrets sometimes for the best of intentions. They think that if somebody, and that's part of Call Me Carmela, is someone is several people are keeping secrets, and
Mhm.
they think they're doing the right thing. They think that the truth will be more painful than lying about it or keeping it a secret, and they are mistaken. But their original intention, at least, was you could say was kind. They were trying not to do any hurt. But of course, secrets have a way of being exposed. And when dealing with a child, a teenager, Ava is 18, um, this secret, all she wants to know is the truth. And says that she can bear the truth. What's unbearable to her is not knowing why it was that she had been given up for adoption. And she has all kinds of, this is what happens with secrets. People will fill in the gap in their
Yes.
understanding with incredible stories. Um, Sometimes they make up a story that's easier to carry than what they suspect is the actual truth. And that's what Ava is doing. And she has built up an incredible damaging story about why it was that she was adopted. And she's running with that. And Dot really realizes that the only thing that's going to salvage this whole situation is the truth. As painful as it is, it's easier in some ways to deal with that.
Yes, it is. And part of your character's truth is discovering what's behind this closed adoption.
Yes.
I mean, that's a huge issue. How did you go about doing research for that particular aspect of the book? Because it's not something that everybody knows about, and when you go peeking behind the curtain, it's kind of frightening.
It's really interesting. I mean, California is the bellwether state for many things that are progressive. To discover that it still has closed adoptions here where many other states don't was a surprise. The research on this was really fascinating. I felt like I had um, just stepped into a universe that was filled with both joy and heartbreak. Because you would read, I would read stories. I credit one of the websites I went to called First Mother with being really helpful for me, and I credit them in the acknowledgments. That was a website run by a woman who wanted to help both the adopted person and the adoptive parents, as well as the birth parents, learn how to talk to each other. I mean, how do you, if you've just discovered who your birth mother is, and you haven't spoken to this person in 18, 20, 25, 30 years, how do you approach her? And so there was a lot of actual, here's the kind of letter you might write, here's what you might say, here's the kind of thing maybe you should avoid saying, here's what you should be taking into consideration. uh, and the nuances of all of this were absolutely fascinating. I mean, there are birth parents who have one of the secrets they're keeping is the identity of the other parent because they believe it would be destructive to reveal this person's identity because this person is a terrible person. So how do you make that decision for another human being that they shouldn't not know this? Um, or so I mean, just the angles and the twists and the turns
Yeah.
about adoption and the complexity of it, I thought was really interesting because I'm not adopted. I don't know. I have a very dear friend from high school who was adopted, and she just finished reading Carmela, and it was important to me to ask her, did I get this right? And she said, you got it exactly right. And she said, it was heartbreaking for me to read this book because Ava gets to do things I never did.
Yeah. That is a good point. Now, as in putting together Call Me Carmela, what was the most difficult aspect for you as an author to get Dot, to follow this path, this story about the adoption and the young girl? What was the most difficult part for you as the author?
Well, this book actually started out as a standalone. It had
Mm,
nothing to do with Dot Meyerhof. And I wrote it and I sent it out to my beta readers, and they sent it back to me and they said, we hate Ava. She's mean. She's unlikable. We can't identify with her. Do it again. So I did it again. I rewrote it. I made her a bit more likable, and fixed up some other things that my beta readers had complained about. And then I went out with the last of the beta readers. She came in much after all the others, and we're sitting outside during the pandemic having a glass of wine. And she says to me, Ellen, I don't think this is a standalone. I think this is a Dot Meyerhof. I think I fell on the ground and told her she would ruin my life. Then I think I had another glass of wine. And then I went back to the drawing board, and she was absolutely right. So converting 82,000 words into a Dot Meyerhof, how do I, as you said, how do I get Dot involved? Because when you have an amateur sleuth, you always have to figure out a way to get him or her involved in the crime.
right.
So Fran, the godmother, was my linchpin there for doing that. And then part of the original book was, when I thought it was a standalone, was set in Iowa, and other parts. So how do I get Ava and Dot in the same room? Even so, I had to do some geographical turning things around. So there were a lot of structural problems like the geography to solve. But once I figured that Fran would be the linchpin, she'd be the reason that Dot got involved, then the whole thing took off. And my friend was absolutely right. This was definitely a Dot Meyerhof book.
Yeah, she's right. It works very effectively as a Dot book. We're gonna finish up with something we call three quick hits, and that's what I want to put you in Dot's headspace, and I'm gonna ask you three quick questions and just answer them as Dot would. So, what's Dot's favorite cocktail? What does she like to drink?
Red wine.
Yeah.
Pinot
How
Noir.
about Pinot Noir? Okay. How about Dot's favorite music? What does she listen to?
Classical music.
Okay, that fits. And finally, what's Dot's greatest fear?
Losing another client
Yeah,
to suicide. Yeah.
I think that fits very, very well with her.
Mhm.
Folks, we've been talking with Ellen Kirschman, the author of Call Me Carmela. Do you have your book cover there so you can show folks what they have looking for them? Yeah, you're going to want to check out the series. It's a fun series. I've followed it all the way along, and then Call Me Carmela is the latest. It's a fun installment from Dot Meyerhof from Ellen Kirschman. So, Ellen, thank you for being with us today.
And thank you, Jim. I'm happy to be here.
All right, you take care. We'll see you again soon.
Bye bye.